Hey everyone, and welcome to the Tom's Hardware Show for June 4th, 2020. Great to see it. Great to see everybody here. I'm Avram Pilch, editor-in-chief of Tom's Hardware, and I'm joined as always by senior editor Sharon Harding, and this week by by deputy managing editor Paul Alcorn. So there's obviously a lot going on in tech this week, as per usual. What do you? But before we get talking about this week's stories, what have you guys been working on that's interesting? Sharon, Paul, how about you?
Okay, I've been working on the Core i7-10700K testing. It's basically a 9900K from the previous gen at a much lower price point. We're doing a lot of workstation testing on that, and we also have the locked version of the chip in and a motherboard from ASRock that allows you to overclock. We'll break it down how it works, but it's kind of like overclocking on locked processors. So, of course, that's very interesting. So that's been keeping me busy.
Wow, fantastic. How about you, Sharon?
I've been working on a bunch of peripheral reviews. Some are actually on products that aren't out yet, so I can't talk much about it, but I guess I could say that there are some interesting peripherals coming out in the coming weeks and some new options. So if you've been bored at home and wanting to upgrade the peripherals you've been using to pass the time, there might be some options coming up in the next few weeks.
Yeah, so this was a big week. And I think if you tuned in last week, you saw this too for Raspberry Pi stuff. There was a new Raspberry Pi model launched last Thursday. The operating system that people have been using for years underwent a major rebrand and new version. And so we've been doing a lot of tutorials and testing there. And now I have with me a peripheral that I just got in that can show over here for a second. This is, I'm going to be playing with this shortly. I just took it out of the box. This is the ThinkPad TrackPoint Keyboard 2. We saw this at CES, but it's just come onto the marketplace recently, and I just got one to review. I'm kind of excited to play with this. It feels like a keyboard from a ThinkPad, and it has the nub, which I know not everybody loves, but I love. And it is both Bluetooth and 2.4 gigahertz wireless. So it'll make a good media keyboard, but it also make a good keyboard if you're doing switching back and forth between devices, because you could switch between the Bluetooth and the 2.4 gigahertz wireless. So let's say you had a Raspberry Pi or another desktop and you want to switch back and forth, and you keep this on your lap, and because it has a track point, you don't need a touchpad or a mouse with you. So a great space saver with a good feel. I'm looking forward to playing with this. So speaking of things that are good for playing, Paul, let's talk about Intel's new Core i5 CPU that we just published a review of. This is the 10600K, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So if you could share my screen, we could just walk through it real fast to give you a quick summary.
Yep. You got to put the share screen up.
I do. Excuse me. Hold on.
Dun, dun,
dun, dun. All right. Here we go. Okay. So the 10600K review. Basically, what you have here is with Intel.
It's still not shared. You got to hit the share screen at the bottom.
Oh, sorry.
Oh.
The power is in your hands, Paul.
The embarrassment. Okay, can we see it now?
No. Oh.
Let's see. I hit add to stream. Nah, there we are. Okay.
Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. Basically, what we have is last generation of Intel's processors. It's $262. You got 6 cores and 6 threads. With this generation, you're getting basically 6 cores and 12 threads for pretty much the same price. So really, the Core i5, the new Core i5 10600, is equivalent to the i7 model from the previous generation, except for price. It has more threads, which gives it pretty similar performance. So we're calling it the mainstream gaming champ because at this price point, in games and stuff like that, it's incredibly fast. And when it comes to overclocking, unlike what we saw with the 10900K, even when we're overclocking it to 5 gigahertz, we're only hitting about 85 degrees Celsius. So it's pretty easy to cool. There's a lot of overclocking headroom, and it's pretty decent on power consumption, which is why it's easy to cool. I mean, considering what it is, of course, it's a lot higher than AMD, but you can cool it with normal cooling. So if we just come back here to the last page and just to give you just a basic summary, if we look at the average frames per second up here at the top, this is through our whole test suite for gaming performance. The 10900K overclocked at 5.1 gigahertz is basically $500. The 10600K overclocked at 5.0 is only $262, but there isn't much difference in performance here. Now, the difference is a bit bigger if you look at performance at stock, but the key takeaway here is you're not losing much for that price point, and it's going to be a lot easier to cool, and it's pretty much plug and play. If we look down at the AMD processors that compete, up here we have the 10600K. The next nearest AMD is the 3700X, which actually costs $38 more, but it isn't quite as fast in gaming. And when we look at the chips that are in the same price range, they're pretty far down the stack. So the Core i5 10600K makes a pretty convincing argument for gaming. And typically AMD, one of the big selling points is that they have more cores and threads, so they're faster in productivity applications. Since Intel bulked it up, we can see that here is the geometric mean of our multi-threaded tests. The 10600K actually comes out on top against the 3600X and the 3600, the relevant competing AMD processors. So in a nutshell, it gives you, a pretty good value for $262. You're basically getting Core i7 performance for Core i5 pricing.
Wow. Well, I mean, sounds to me like if you were buying a, if you were building a, say, sub $1,500 PC today for gaming, what is this the CPU you would use?
Absolutely. I would recommend this this CPU, especially in this price range, if you're focused specifically on gaming. Now, AMD still, even though they aren't quite the differences in multi-threaded performance for like multitasking and heavy productivity apps, they're still very, very competitive, and their pricing is a little bit better on the Ryzen 5 3600 and 3600X. So if you're not focused on gaming so much, the Ryzen processors are still a really good choice.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like people are getting a lot of value for their money with these mid-range processors. At what point is it actually useful or necessary to buy something like a Core i9 that costs so much more?
Well, we tend to shy away from recommending processors over $350 or $400 if you're just going to do gaming. If that's your primary thing, really, to be honest, that would you could save that money and spend it on a better graphics card. Most Core i7s will do you just fine. And now you're looking at a Core i5 that could pretty much do whatever you need on gaming. I guess for those Core i9. If you're doing a lot of heavy multitasking, if you're gaming, streaming and recording, but then when you start talking about Core i9, you can pick up some Ryzen models that they have more cores and threads, and they're usually a lot better at those types of uses. So if you're building just a pure gaming rig just to game, I actually wouldn't recommend a Core i9 for most people.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing is, obviously there are people with unlimited budgets that they want the best of the best. Yeah. And hey, I can't blame them, right? But what can you know? But I think for most normal people who have budget constraints, they want something like a Core i5 or a Ryzen 5 or Ryzen 7 is you'd probably be better off putting the money into your graphics card.
Yep. It'll give you a better balance, for sure. But I mean, if you have no limit on your budget, then a Core i9 is absolutely, the top. The Core i9 10900K is the fastest gaming processor available. So in that case, if money is no object, a Core i9 would be, a good fit.
So Sharon, you're our resident VR expert. What do you think people need do you think people need a higher end processor to run PC based VR?
Well, most of the headsets will give you, will tell you the minimum spec requirements to run their headsets, and I feel like a lot of those are still on 8th gen processors to start. And as Paul has kind of just demonstrated, and I actually wanted to ask you this, Paul, with this i5 kind of performing like a last gen i7, does that kind of shift the idea of, the tier of how powerful an i3 versus an i5, i7? Because it seems like before, if you were thinking you're in the i7 category for your needs, you could actually do a 10th gen i5 and get away with it. So I'm actually kind of curious as to how we look at those categories now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you're primarily for gaming, like VR tends to rely upon single threaded performance, like per core performance. How fast is your core? So if you have a pretty capable chip, that clocks pretty high, I mean, an i5 from this generation is absolutely more than enough. It's probably more than you need, because they do a lot of, they lock the frame rates on HMDs. So it doesn't take as powerful of a GPU to run some of them as you would think. We run VR Mark for in our test suite as part of our games test suite, and even a Ryzen 5 3600 is going to be more than enough for most people to run a good headset.
So when you're when one is gaming, of course, it's really important, as we've talked about before, to have the right tools. Every artist needs their tools. Every gamer needs their tools, and that means having the right keyboard. And having the right keyboard means not just having one that looks good or has all the RGBs. It means having the switch type that's meaningful for you. So I know, Sharon, you've been doing a lot of research on the different mechanical switch types. How would you describe the switch market to folks who aren't really familiar with mechanical switches?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been expanding over the past few years. Cherry, the German company Cherry, if you've looked into switches at all, you've probably seen their MX brand, Cherry MX switches. And Cherry had a lockdown on that switch technology for a while. And with the time frame on those legal restrictions ending over the past few years, we've seen a lot more companies making switches, from companies like Kale, Gatoron, but also the peripheral makers themselves making their own switches and putting that in their own keyboards instead of buying it from third parties. So Razer's making their own switches these days, HyperX, Steel Series. And this keyboard is from, let's see if I can get this in the shot, from Rocat. And this also has Rocat's own proprietary switch. But a lot of them, you'll see, they're still kind of following Cherry's color-coded style. So this Rocat, this is their Titan tactile switch, but it's brown, the color brown. And like Cherry's brown switches, they're both tactile switches with that bump that you can feel when you're pressing it. But a lot of the people who are making switches now are also tweaking the traditional Cherry specification. So for example, Cherry's brown switch has a longer travel distance. Cherry's brown is 2 millimeters total travel, while Rocat's is, Rocat's is 3.6 millimeters total, while Cherry's is 4. So the idea is that you get a quicker experience for when you're gaming. But honestly, the market's really flooded right now. I have a couple switch testers, and this isn't even like a fraction of all the different options there are out there right now.
Wait, is that pink?
This is pink. This is I'm gonna try again. This is a new kale switch that I actually just got. I'm gonna be testing it out soon. It's Silent Box Red, but yeah, it's pink.
Doesn't look like a box. It looks like a circle.
Yeah, and it definitely looks pink. So I'm glad you said that.
Yeah. So is it supposed to feel like a red switch because it's pink?
It definitely does feel like a red switch. I could tell you that. It's linear, so there's no bump, and it's pretty quiet. There's no clicky noise to it. So, I'll have to. I literally just got these. I just pulled them out of the box for this show. But yeah, I don't know if they're meant to be a direct red alternate because Kale already has a red one, which is here, and it's literally red. So I'll have to do some testing to figure out why you would pick this pink red one over the red one.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything's just got a slightly different feel, and I'm always excited to try different feels. I mean, obviously, there's like the major colors that people. I mean, I think you would probably say there's like three major colors that everybody knows about, which is red, brown, and blue, right?
Mhm.
You have the red, which is the linear, which there's no bump and it's quiet, and that a lot of people like those for gaming, right? Because you can shoot really fast. And then there's the brown, which is quiet and tactile, and then there's dun dun dun, the best one. No, I mean that's a matter of opinion, but there's the
White.
there's the blue,
Oh, I
which
thought
is
you liked the blue.
well, I mean of the major colors
Okay.
of the well-known ones is blue, which is the clicky one. But then you have all these other switches that riff off of that. My favorite for a while now has been the Kale Box White, which is clicky, loud and clicky like the blue, but like what you described is that sound but is but has a slightly shorter travel of 3.6 millimeters than the 4 millimeters of blue. Plus, it actuates it. Remember, when you're saying the travel, we're also saying it actuates sooner too, right? So,
And it's interesting, like how much you can actually tell the difference. I recently tested HyperX's red switches compared to Cherry's, and I have the benefit of having, a switch tester. I could test them side by side. HyperX's is literally 3.8 millimeter total versus 4 millimeter. It sounds like nothing, but I could actually feel and notice the difference. But sometimes you would think 0.2 millimeters isn't going to do anything, and sometimes you can't tell the difference. Sometimes I put them two side by side and I'm testing them and I struggle to feel the difference, which is what actually the case with this Rocat tactile brown switch versus a cherry brown. I don't immediately feel a difference.
So, what's your favorite switch right now?
I like blue ones. Green is just a little too clicky for me, and brown is a close second, but it's not loud and obnoxious enough. I need everyone to know I'm working.
See, that's been my feeling about it. Like, I always just want a keyboard to jump up and punch me in the face. It's like I want it, but green can be a little bit. Green is, yeah. Green is. I mean, green, for those who are not in the know, green is like blue, but requires more heavier. So you got to press harder. And Razer makes their own green, and then there's cherry green, which you don't see a lot. I've been of a split mind about green because while I like the heavy switch, it is a little heavy after a while, and I found that like white seemed to be, Kale White seemed to be really good. I'm still waiting to finally get a keyboard where I can try some of the other clickies like Kale Navy and Kale Jade, which are slightly heavier, lighter.
I can feel the difference. I'm doing that right now. That's actually noticeably heavier.
Yeah, I mean,
I like greens, but I use the what are those called? The dampers, the little round O-rings at the bottom to kind of soften the landing.
Why?
Yeah, you're trying to be nice to someone? Why?
Well, because it's loud. You have to exert some force, and it's loud, and it also gives it a nice bump at the bottom. Just if you have never tried them, just give it a shot.
I have tried them, and it felt like typing through plastic through cellophane for me.
It's
But-
kind of like springy. It makes them springy. I like it. Springy.
But I think what we've revealed here is how much this is really a matter of personal preference, and but I think the overall message is like you should have a preference, right? Like you should try these different switches when you should think about this a lot, because first of all, mechanical keyboards not that expensive if you don't have one. I mean, you can get, some of the more expensive ones are $150, but you can get a decent one even for $80, $90. And this is something that you're touching all day, every day as you use your computer. So it's definitely something where you want to, to put the time in and get something good. And that might last you for years. I had an IBM Model M keyboard from the 90s that I was using for like 10 years until I spilled soda on it. It would still be going today, but I was happy when it broke because then I could get a keyboard that had a Windows key, because it was made before Windows keys existed. So what I wanted to talk about this week was our monthly list of best Raspberry Pi projects. We compile this now every month. If you are someone who does Raspberry Pi projects, we would love to hear from you. But we go out and we find the coolest new projects that people have been working on this month, in the last month, and working on this month, and we document that. So we have this article up on our site, so I won't read you the whole article, but let's talk about some of the coolest stuff that's in it. So one of the really cool things that we have is a face detecting candy launcher. So you stick your face in front of it. It uses the Pi uses AI, and it shoots candy, maybe M&Ms or something, into your mouth. So that's contactless food delivery if you're interested. Someone has made a Raspberry Pi cat laser robot that will do laser pointer for your cat with you. So that's good, because if you've ever had a cat that is just on your case and needs attention and you don't have time to give it to them, you can at least keep them exercised and attentive with your robot.
It doesn't have to just be for cats too. Dogs, kids, fish, whatever you got.
Yes.
Yes.
Me.
Paul. Yeah.
Yeah, Paul.
Yeah.
So obviously this isn't the first we've ever seen anything like this, but a user called Mr. Edwiz on Reddit came up with a really neat Twitter checking bot that will light up different LED colors depending on what tweets you get. This really shows how you can marry the physical world of the Raspberry Pi with the virtual world of something like Twitter. Speaking of marrying the physical and the virtual world, we have a tutorial up separate from this article on how to do a motion sensor, a motion detector that will alert you on your phone using Raspberry Pi, and if this, then that. So with that tutorial, you'll be able to set up a Raspberry Pi with a camera. When somebody walks in front of it, it will send an alert to your phone using an app called Telegram, and you will get a picture of who or whatever triggered it. So that's another way where you're taking something that's happening locally, let's say in your house, and you're sending it to the internet. And with a Twitter bot, obviously the opposite. You're taking something that's happening on the internet and you're making a light up. Another really neat thing that we've documented is an AR light switch. So what happens is it uses an AR, a smartphone and a Pi to create an AR environment with a virtual button that you can press. So you point your camera at the virtual button, you press it, and it turns on a real light in your house that is controlled by a Raspberry Pi. Yes, it seems a little excessive for turning on and off a light, but a lot of times we do things just because they're cool, and that definitely is cool. Someone has also created, and I think this is really neat, an emergency toolkit made out of a Raspberry Pi tablet and a Pelican case that withstands an EMP blast. So it kind of looks like a nuclear football case or something. So if you, if you are in a nuclear war and you want to make sure that you can still run Raspberry Pi OS while everyone else is in the Stone Age,
But is it
that might actually make your computer the most powerful one on Earth. This will help you.
But is it 5G proof? Someone is selling USB sticks for $350 that it popped up in the news last week that are supposedly blocks 5G signals, and a tech site bought it and looked at, took it apart, looked at it. It's just a regular USB stick. So
surprise.
Yes, but it's a great marketing material. They should make a 5G proof Raspberry Pi case.
Everything in my house is 5G proof because I'm not getting any 5G over here. So it's pretty easy to find something that's 5G proof. It's called Be Almost Anywhere where they haven't rolled it out yet, which is a lot of places. Yeah. So go figure. Yeah, I mean, that would be a kind of a fun thing to do on one of these shows, is if we got some type of weird bogus gadget and took it apart for everybody. The $350 5G proof USB stick. But what can you say? Finally, one of the really cool projects that we have that we listed is a glucose meter. So you can keep track of your glucose. So there's just an endless amount of things that you can do with Raspberry Pi, and we're constantly covering them, both ones that other people have done and tutorials that we have written, including this week, the one on the motion camera and the one on how to use Google Stadia using a Raspberry Pi. So some UK guy actually recommended the 5G blocker, Jared says. Well, I mean, if you like to spend money on things that you don't need, then I recommend it also.
This is the unlimited budget people again we're talking about?
Actually, I have figured out a way that the 5G blocker could block you from 5G legitimately. The 5G blocker could block you from 5G because it's $350 and you will not have that money to buy a 5G phone. So it is without question a 5G blocker.
What is the real concern here? Should I be scared of 5G? Everyone's telling me I should be excited about it. Why are we blocking it?
Oh, that's a deep rabbit hole there. I mean, there's some people who believe
it has been widely scientifically discredited, as if there was ever credit to this idea that 5G causes diseases, including a really wild theory that 5G is the cause of COVID-19. Unless there's one 5G tower in town and everybody is hanging around next to it, not social distancing and coughing on each other, there is no way that 5G can cause illness. Certainly not cause a virus like COVID-19.
During the early days of the pandemic, they had a rash of people burning down 5G towers in the EU. I mean, it's a real big conspiracy theory. Let's be honest. Over there in the UK, and they've had utility workers being attacked who weren't even installing 5G stuff. Just regular internet or whatever, because they were deemed essential workers, and people were attacking them. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. We live in interesting times, that's for sure. But rest assured, and if anybody wants the receipts, I'll be happy to personally email them a bunch of stories about this, about why 5G does not cause COVID-19. But I feel like that is one that doesn't pass the smell test the second that you hear it. Sort of like the other crazy theory that Bill Gates invented COVID-19 in 2006 and patented it. Anyone who's ever used Windows knows that no one at Microsoft knows how to control viruses in any way, shape, or form. So
Oof.
that one just does not
Got him.
pass the smell test whatsoever. Anyway, this is the time of the show when it's a good time to take questions and comments from our audience. Has anybody got anything they want to ask? A guy named Tim Tim, asks if when 8 gigabyte Raspberry Pi is going to be on sale. I think there are places that have it listed now, but not every place has it in stock. One place I know that has listed it, but seems to be out of stock right now is Vilros.com, Vilros. But that is a pretty decent place to look for it. Because unfortunately, Amazon is not a particularly good place to buy Raspberry Pis unless you're buying a kit. If you're just buying the bare board, they don't have a lot of them for sale, and those that they do tend to be way above MSRP. So other sites that unfortunately I think often charge for shipping, like Vilros, CanaKit, and Adafruit, sell the bare boards. And if you live near a Micro Center, I think Micro Center may have it. They certainly have other Raspberry Pis, but of course that involves going out to the store, which in this day and age is a little bit, could be risky. Adam says they had them, he got 2 from there, and now they're out of stock. Yeah, so I guess there's high demand, but I'm sure they'll be coming back in stock. It's definitely something since I'm getting these comments, I'll look into it and see which places have and don't have them, and maybe I'll drop a line to some of those folks that I know there. Jared asks, how different is the Core i5 10600K from an i7 8700K? Are there any low-level architectural changes that matter to end users, like side channel attack mitigations, perhaps?
No, there are no significant moves forward on that front. We covered that in the Comet Lake S announcement. So Intel went back and they created some new steppings of their 9th gen processors that they rolled out very quietly. When we tested the 9900KS, actually in our review of that, we cover this because we discovered that it had an RO stepping. Splave, a world record setting overclocker that we work with quite a bit, had he had a 9900KS and he couldn't set quite the records. And he wrote an article for us about it as well. And it turns out he couldn't match the records that he had set with the 9900K. And it turns out because the new stepping adds some security mitigations. So we dug into that, and we had comments from Intel on the matter, and we have a list on our site of which mitigations are there. But that list of mitigations hasn't changed with the 10th gen processor. So if you're saying, if I purchased an 8700K on launch day, however many years ago that was, 2 years, I think, today's chips would have more. But if you've bought a 8700K in the last year with the new stepping, no, it's the exact same thing in terms of security mitigation. So that's a big thing.
Yep. So is anybody else in the chat room have anything else they want to talk about?
Jared asks us if physically a 6-core die. We have confirmed with Intel. I did it prior to this review. The Intel with its Core i5s, they have 2 different die. They have 6-core dies and 10-core dies, as Jared points out. With the non-K models, they will swap in either a 6-core or a 10-core die at their discretion. The 10-core die, they have different stepping numbers, but there's no way for a consumer to identify the difference between the two. Because of thermal density issues with the 6-core models, those ones will come with solder TIM. But the i5s, that come with the 10 core die will have standard TIM because the die, the active cores are spread out, so they don't have as much heat density problems. Now, all of that is all fine and good, but none of that applies to the i5K model. It comes with only the 10 core die, but with the other i5s, you're rolling the dice unless you go and check the stepping before you buy it. But right now, there isn't even a comprehensive list of which ones have 6 core with solder TIM or which ones have 10 core with polymer TIM.
So I think we have time for one more question. And Javier asks, which video card would bottleneck a Ryzen 3 3300X and make you want to get a 10600K instead? Where is the border?
I think that I mean, when you're looking down in the where the Ryzen 3 3300X is down on the real low end of the market, we actually included it in our game tests for the 10600K, and especially at the end of our article where we have a summation of the game titles. It's very competitive for what it is, but it doesn't have quite the heft. So I think that, I mean, it definitely wouldn't be as high as a 2070, maybe a 2060 would make more sense. Of where, maybe 2070 Super would make a little more sense to be the cutoff point, or a 5700 XT. We would probably have to do a little bit more dedicated testing to give you that answer definitively. So, I mean, 2060, I think, would be about the limit of what I would pair with a $120 chip, to be honest. That being the Ryzen 3 3300X. So.
Yes. So there are your food and wine pairings for GPU and CPU. Anyway, that's all the time we have for this week's show. Just wanted to say for Tom's Hardware, I'm Avram.
I'm Sharon.
And I'm Paul.
See you guys next week.
Bye.
All right.